Well, are we live? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the WordPress Accessibility Day 2020. My name is Roberto Remedios. I'm user interface designer. I live on San Jose, Costa Rica. I'm also an accessibility advocate. I have been working on Latin America with accessibility with different groups of people, deaf people, blind people, and I love to share with all you guys tonight. I forget to thanks on the last talk to our sponsors, to our organizers, and to my moderator, Kevin, who is posting the questions that you guys add on YouTube into the page. Please remember, if you have any question, just put the questions on the YouTube chat. Our next speaker is Susanna Laurin, and he will be talking about accessibility by default in authoring tools. She is a Chief Research and Innovation Officer at Funka. She has more than 20 years of experience in working with accessibility at the senior management level. She's an internationally expert on the European Union accessibility policy and regulations, and she has did several workshops and write some books about the specific EN standard. So you have the control right now, Susanna. Thank you for joining us. You can share your screen.
Okay, thank you, Roberto. I think I'm now sharing my screen, and hopefully I also have my microphone on. Is this working? You can nod, at least.
Yes, it's working.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. So good morning, everyone. I'm doing this from Sweden, Europe, so it's very early Saturday morning, and I want to tell you straight away that I'm not a developer. So if you have technical questions around my presentation, I would be happy to forward them to our developers. I can't get them to wake up this early in the morning on a Saturday. So unfortunately, you will have to live just with me. But thank you for having me on this marathon accessibility event. It's exciting. So I can't make this work. Why? Yeah, so just a little bit about me. I am the Chief Research and Innovation Officer at Funka. I'm also the representative of the UN initiative G3ICT and the International Association of Accessibility Professionals representative to the EU. I do a lot of strategic consulting these days, mainly for the European Union, but also for EU member state national governments when they are transposing the EU legislation into national law. I'm leading the WADEX subgroup, which is an expert group helping the Commission and the member states implementing the Web Accessibility Directive, one of the recent legislations in this area. And I'm also one of the technical experts in the ETSI Special Task Force 536. And we have been responsible for updating and harmonizing the EN standard, which is the minimum requirements of the legislation in Europe. Just a couple of words on the company I work for, Funka. We are specialists in accessibility, but we were founded by the disability movement in Sweden, and we started as an NGO really, but were converted into a private company in the year 2000. We have our headquarters in Stockholm and offices also in Oslo and Madrid and Brussels. We do consulting and development on on accessibility and usability. We do also a lot of research and innovation, and that's nowadays the department that I lead. So we do national projects and also European and global projects in research and innovation. We also cover policy and different kind of studies and investigations. And we are, of course, also engaged in standardization, which is extremely important if you want to do accessibility. Also one of the proud founders of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. So in Europe, the Web Accessibility Directive is really turning everything upside down here. We have been living in a world where we have more recommendations on accessibility than actual regulations. And this is now changing. We started with the procurement directive a couple of years ago. Now the Web Accessibility Directive is covering public sector. And in 2022, we will also have the European Accessibility Act, which will cover products and services in some of the private sector. So we are really moving from recommendations to regulations. And it's an interesting time to be alive here, but we have a couple of problems when this is happening, of course. And one of the biggest problems that we have tried to solve or looked into at least is really that accessibility is much more than a technical issue, of course. And around 50% of the accessibility problems or fails that we encounter when we do audits, they are created by web authors. And this is not a surprise because many web authors, and this is now in public sector mainly, most of the web authors are not professional communication people, and absolute vast majority of them are not accessibility experts. So of course, they do create content that is not perfectly accessible. And this means that we now have approximately 7 million interfaces that are supposed to, to comply with the new regulations. And with 7 million interfaces, we have, I don't know, I can't even count the number of web authors that would need training to make this work. And of course, that's good for us because we are specializing in this and we're happy to provide training, but it just won't scale. It's not enough just to put out manuals and training and you know, trying to make all these web authors do the right thing, because people change their job, they get on parental leave, or you know, we change people all the time. So we just need to do something else than only training, because that is not, will never be enough. And that's when the idea came that what if accessibility could be built into the websites from the start? What if the authoring tools could do something to help here? Maybe everything can't be automized, but at least the authoring tools should have the possibility to give much better support to the web authors. That was sort of the idea behind these research projects. And we managed to lobby for this idea and make more people interested in it. And after a while, the European Commission came out with a call for proposals on trying to see if authoring tools could actually be part of the solution here. So the European funding for research, a very common way of doing this is that you apply for a pilot project where you sort of prove that your idea or thesis is valid and that there is something here to keep looking into. And then if you're successful in your pilot, then you can also have the possibility to make what is called a preparatory action, which is where you actually perform the real research or whatever initiative is needed to be done. So it's a two-step process often. And we did get the opportunity to perform a pilot project a couple of years ago, where we looked at the 30 most used tools in the public sector bodies in the EU. So we crawled the internet for public sector bodies and found the 30 most used tools to make sure that the efforts were made on the most frequently used ones. And we did some piloting and testing. So trying to see what happens if you are not an expert in accessibility and you're procuring this tool, and maybe your supplier is also not an expert in accessibility, because that is the normal case. That is the majority of these situations. What happens then if you just acquire an authoring tool and a website from somebody that is not an expert? How accessible is it then? It's like, I know this is really theoretic because it's not really possible. But the idea is if you just sort of push the button and up comes a website from your package, then how accessible is it by default? What is built in there? And the answer was not much. But we did a lot of surveys and prototypes. We talked to suppliers and vendors and tool makers and so on, try to figure out how much is really included in the sort of basic, the standard templates and so on. And we did a lot of analysis and also user testing, of course, user testing both with web authors and also end users with disabilities to make sure that the results were valid from both perspectives. We did also work a lot with different stakeholders and that this was before the corona, so we could make physical workshops in Brussels. We had specific workshops with web authors from public sector to see what are the user needs, how can the authoring tools help these web authors to make the right thing. It should be easy to do the right thing when you create content. And we also discussed with end users with disabilities, of course, which are the most common problems or fails, or what is the biggest barrier to you, and also looking into the back office, so to speak. So if the web author has a disability, how accessible is the actual interface that you meet as author? So the back end, so to speak, the input part of the authoring tools. And then we also discussed with the tool makers and other vendors, suppliers, and also standardization bodies. So we had a series of workshops where we really collected user needs and experiences from these 4 different stakeholder groups. And the result from this pilot was that, well, there's not much accessibility by default out there in the most used tool, unfortunately, but there are big demand, and also we thought that there would be, well, a good potential to do something. If something is not perfect, then you have the potential to make it better. So the result of the pilot was really a matrix of the most used tools. And also we made 3 sets of guidelines for web authors or people who are procuring or looking for a tool, also for end users with disabilities and for the industry. And really this was then the starting point for further research. And the result of this from the open parts, and not everything is public, but the public parts of this project results can be found on our website. It's www.funka, which is funka.com/we4authors. So we and the number 4 and authors. And then, of course, the next phase started, and we were happy enough to get also the second phase funded by the Commission. And we are now a third into the preparatory action, which is called WE4Authors Cluster. And here we work with a cluster of tool makers because we think we need now to dig deep into the real code and the real potential of this. So based on the user needs that we found in the pilots, we are going to create new features that can be adapted into whatever tool you use. We are going to do extensive user testing to make sure that the features that we create are really good, they're user-friendly, they are solving the right problems, and that the web authors like them, because otherwise they won't be a success. We are then going to try to implement these features in different kinds of tools so that we make sure that we can reach as big part of the market as possible. And we are then, when the project is finished by July next year, we are going to share code if we are resulting in code, which I hope, or if we can't produce the code, then at least we will share the documentation and prototypes, videos, visits, or whatever it can be from the user testing to show as inspiration for others, because maybe everything can't just be a snippet of code and then you can just implement it quickly into whatever tool. Maybe life is not that easy always. So we will also describe the feature and describe how it works and what people liked with it, so that then the rest of the market can hopefully use those ideas and for inspiration and also implement these ideas in their own tools. And this is really an important part of all European research, of course, that the result is going to be for the common good. So this is not something we or the partners will keep behind any closed doors. The idea is really to share with the community. And the members of this cluster right now are Drupal. We have Mike Gifford of Open Concept, who is representing Drupal here. We have Plone, represented by Timo Stollenberg from Kit Concept in Germany. We have SiteVision, a Swedish licensed, license-based authoring tool. We have Joomla, and Brian Thiemann is the representative for Joomla, and the foundation of Joomla in Germany is also part of the project. And we have Umbraco, represented by Sigma in the UK. So these are the cluster members who are representing different kind of authoring tools. And we are, of course, also working with other tool providers. But we are also closely related to the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, so that we can reach out to both vendors and also customers using these tools and the end user organizations. So with the IAAP, we have a really broad outreach apart from the partners' own network, so to speak. And we also work closely with ERIN, which is the European Regions Research and Innovation Network. So with this network, we can also make sure that we reach a lot of the public sector bodies, web authors in Europe for user testing and also making sure that the user requirements are met in a really relevant way for them. After the discussions with the stakeholders and the different user groups, and specifically, of course, the web authors, their needs, and also the ideas and experiences from our cluster members. So to make sure that whatever we do is sort of relevant and possible to use also for the tool makers. We have we set up a set of criteria for how the features would, what kind of problems we wanted to solve, how frequently this problem was occurring, and so on. And then based on these criteria, we selected 10 different features that we wanted to try with users. So now we are specifically in the position in the project where we have already selected 10 features, and we are now going to user test them starting in October. So we are right now finishing or refining the prototypes that we are then going to test in an iterative process, of course, inviting users, web authors, and others interested to test the prototypes and come back to us with feedback so that we can refine them and make them better and better. So we have until Christmas to do this, really, but we're starting here in October. So the features that we have selected to try and make sure that we can support users, web authors with, is really how to provide alt text, alternative text on images, sort of very basic thing. But we have seen that this is solved in different ways in different authoring tools, and sometimes it's quite hard to make it in a good way, and sometimes it's, well, you have the possibility to add the alt text, but you don't get any support on how to write it or when to write it or when not, and so on. So the whole idea here is to provide more support. If something can be maybe mandatory, we will try to make it mandatory. All texts can't really be mandatory because not all images need them, and so on. But we can also prompt for the web author to do something, so it's really visible, it's really you're sort of pushed to do the right thing. You shouldn't be you shouldn't have to look for the place where to write the alt text. It should be very obvious and sort of in the flow of your authoring process. And then we can also provide maybe support at different levels or information. So we have all these sort of the levels of automation we can do. We can either build it in so that it's really by default making it accessible, or we can prompt it, or we can make information or support in other ways. So we will try different ways of doing this and see what the web authors find most useful, and then present that to the market when we have a good decision there. So alt text is the first one. And then we are also prototyping now the possibility to change language when you have multiple language on a website or a page, which is very common in the European context. We often have websites with more than one language. Also, we're looking at documentation of the accessibility features, because our research has shown that many web authors don't really know what their authoring tool can do. So how can we make the documentation better? And also, how can we make it, or we want to try if it's better to have the documentation, the information, the support, and the wizards sort of in context. So where you are actually doing something, that is where you can find the information, or if that may be disturbing for you because the user experience will be then maybe too crowded or too overwhelming with all this information. So maybe it's better to have it sort of on the side that you need to go look for it. And we have seen different situations, different contexts, and also different web author groups who prefer one or the other. So this will be really interesting to do A/B testing on. Of course, some of the really big troublemakers in authoring is tables and forms. So we are going to test supportive tables creators and also forms editors in different way that can, well, a combination of making it accessible by default and supporting on when you do more complex tables and forms. Of course, everything can't be automated. Or at least not now, maybe in the future, but we want to make sure that the author has better support in doing the right thing. When it comes to video, we are testing supporting the editor on how to make sure that the video is compliant with the regulations. And then we have 4 features that are sort of connected to each other, and they all have to do with testing. So we want to try out how to best test accessibility while or when you are editing or publishing something. So we are trying to have testing procedures built into the editor. So while you're actually creating the content, and then another specific sort of easy win is if we support web authors in providing accessible documents, specifically PDF documents, which is all over the world. I think we have unaccessible or inaccessible documents, and that is a big issue that many web authors tell us they would like to have support in. So some kind of testing before you or while you're uploading your document so that you know if the document is okay or not. Then we want to test the full page. So when you have provided all the images and the objects and the content that you are going to publish, then during this content creation phase, you could also test all the different parts and objects that you are going to publish. So before publishing, just check if it's accessible or not. And then, of course, helping you to remediate this will be an important part. And maybe not specifically for the web author, but for the website owner or the person who is responsible for the whole accessibility, the accessibility of the whole website, then of course there could also be a built-in testing tool for the whole website. And please note that we are not building a new automatic tools for accessibility testing. There are many out there and some of them are really good. So we are not going to test if they are good or bad. It's just how can they be combined or included or implemented in the authoring tool or in the content creation phase so that it supports the web authors in a better way. Because what we see is that many of the testing tools are quite technical and they may be very helpful for developers, but the web authors are sometimes not very technical, so it can't be too sort of success criteria related and really technical in the way it's presented. It needs to support you in another way. And we think combining it into the content creation phase could be really helpful for at least some of the web authors. So these are the 10 features that we are now prototyping and going to test. And these are going to be like generic tests, so that we have made them anonymous, so to speak. So we are trying to just test the feature. And the prototypes are not supposed to look like any specific tool, but it shouldn't be important which tool you're used to use, but you should be sort of recognizing the content creation, how it looks when you edit content. That is the idea. So we're doing this testing on a prototype level, and then when we have learned more or less what the web authors need or want, then we're also going to do test implementations in the cluster members. So all the authoring tools that are working with us in this project also have the possibility to test these features in their own in the technical environment, so to speak. Of course, it takes time to implement these things in authoring tools, and maybe we won't be finishing this before the project is finished, but at least we want to make sure that we have done some test implementations so that we can also say that we know that these features work in at least some of the technical environments that we have tested, because that makes it more probable that they will also be possible to use for other tool makers. So the test implementation in the specific tools is also an important part. But what we are doing right now is, first of all, the generic testing. And because of the pandemic, we will do some face-to-face physical testing at our offices, but most of the testing, so the quantitative part of it, will be online. So it's actually open for anyone that would like to test these features, and we are happy to welcome anyone. We'll come back to that. So will this solve all the accessibility problems of the world? No, it won't. But we believe that built-in accessibility by default in authoring tools could be an important part of the solution if we succeed in this. Because I mean, this is kind of obvious, but if the authoring tool is supporting you in your content creation phase, then you can avoid unnecessary mistakes. And this is really the primary goal here. Accessibility by default can make it, we can start with the hygiene factors that the authoring tools shouldn't sort of create accessibility problems, but it should also support the author in not doing the mistakes. Another important part here is really to help the non-experts to get it right from the start, because as I mentioned before, most of the web authors in public sector are not specializing in communication and definitely not specializing in accessibility. So we also hope that this can mean that the governments can create framework contracts. So in the centralized procurement that is very much in use in some of the European member states, which can mean that tool makers that do provide accessibility by default using our features or other services, but in some way can prove that they do provide good support for web authors, they can then have an advantage in the competition by being sort of checked on beforehand by the central procurement system. So that is what we're hoping, that a group of tools will be sort of the front runners here, and they will then have the possibility to easier at least sell their services to public sector. And with that, experts in accessibility and also experts in tool making can, and the web authors themselves can focus on more interesting things or more complex issues and sort of solving the rest of the problems that we can't solve in this problem. But that is the aim of these projects. So I would like to invite you all to make contact to us, and if you are like to, or if one of your clients or customers would like to try, if you have any web authors, if you know web authors that are interested in trying out these features, then please do contact us. There is room for everyone who wants to contribute to this, and of course, the more test persons we have from the most part of the world and with different backgrounds and so on, the better it will be. So the results will really depend on the users who want to test. We already have quite a lot of testers. I think at least over 100 organizations have said that they would like to join the testing phase, but we are always welcoming more. So please do contact us. You can use my email, which is Susanna, SUSANNA, @funka.com. We also have a project website. It's not very active yet, because we don't have so much results yet to show, but we will be more active in this website soon, I hope. So you're also welcome to follow the project on accessibilitycluster.com. And with that, I'm open for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Susanna. We don't have a lot of questions. We have one main question at this moment. Is the next one. You mentioned you will develop new features. Do you have examples of what kind of features are good candidates?
Well, before we started testing them, we don't know which ones are the best candidates, but really it's the the 10 features that I talked about and showed the slide. These are the features that we are now testing, and if they all turn out not to work or not to be of interest for web authors, then we will have to come up with new ones, because we have promised the European Commission, who is funding this, that we are going to promote or provide at least 10 features when the project is ready. But as we are just starting the testing phase, I can't tell you which one is the best candidate right now. We are testing all the 10 features, and then hopefully many of them will be good enough to present to the world. And if not, we will have to make another round and yeah, create new ones.
Cool, thank you very much. Well, at this moment, we don't have any other questions. Is there anything that you want to add on this couple of minutes that you didn't cover on your presentation? You have like another 5 minutes if you have anything, or we can make a break.
I think I hope that people will connect with us, and I'm happy to answer any question via email or Twitter, or just reach out to us and we will be happy to discuss this more, because I think there are a lot of interesting things, and we are really eager to hear also from WordPress developers and designers and users. And I hope that you will all be interested in this project and also reach out to us to learn more.
Awesome. Well, we can give it a couple of minutes and see if there is another question on YouTube. Okay, we have a question. Do testers need to be multilingual?
Good question, thank you. No, the tests will be performed in English. So you would need to understand at least the instructions in English, because the prototypes are in English, but otherwise we don't have any requirements on the testers.
Thank you, Susanna. Anyone? If anyone have another question, we're here. I
think it's in the middle of the night in many countries.
Yeah. Yes, actually for me it's past midnight. But what's your time on your country?
It's now 8:30 in the morning, but it's Saturday, so I don't think any are.
Saturday, yeah. Most of Europe people.
Yeah. Still asleep, I think. Yeah.
Just waiting for this Saturday.
Yeah.
But again, thank you very much for sharing with us and take your time. Get early and share with us. I think we're gonna finish at this point. I think LNN is making a question. He say how much time it does it take? How much time it does it take testing?
It's another good question. Well, you can spend as much time as you like, of course, but you can test just one feature, and that will take from 5 to guess, mostly 10 minutes. We of course hope that you test all the features, and you can also come back because we have this iterative process, so then you can test it again and see the refinements. But you can just spend 5 or 10 minutes and do one test, and we will be happy. And if you are really interested and keen, then you can come back and test all the 10 features, and that will then take maybe 1.5 hours or so. And you can also come back and do it more times, but there's no specific requirements on time needed, so you can just do a short one and see if it's interesting, and then hopefully you will stay on and do more tests.
And then we have another question for Ahmed. If you have to name one thing that it would be your biggest achievement in accessibility, what it would be?
My biggest achievement? Well, personally, I think that we are hiring people with disabilities in our company. I think that is the biggest achievement. To me personally, I believe the key to inclusion is to have a workplace, and really that we have been able to not only hire people ourselves, but also help other young people with disabilities to get into the workforce. That is what I'm most proud of in my professional life. That is not really accessibility as such, but I think that is my sort of spontaneous answer to that question.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I think LNN also asked for the previous question, if the time that you describe is also include the training.
Well, there's no training really here in the, I mean, the testing is just really simple prototypes. So you are doing the same thing as you're normally doing as when you're creating content. You are writing a text, you are adding a link, you're adding an image, and then you are supposed to add the alt text and so on. So you're performing this sort of the user scenario from the web authoring perspective, and then there's really a short instruction on what we want you to do to perform the test. So it's not really, I wouldn't say it's training really. So it's a short instruction, then you perform the test, and then that is screen recorded so we can see what you do. So that is sort of fine. But we also always ask you if you have any comments or suggestions or anything. We're really happy if you want to share with us your thoughts. So you also have the possibility to answer some questions afterwards if you would like to. But it wouldn't take more than 15 minutes just to do one of the items.
Okay, awesome. I think that's all the questions that we have. We're going to finish the presentation right here. Thank you very much for your time. Just let the people who is watching this presentation, don't forget to attend our next talk. It will be how to use ARIA in forms at 7 a.m. UTC, presented by Ryan Reveld. Sorry, my accent. But yeah, thank you very much, and we see you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.